So how has my Sogo Vivien been doing since the last update? Well, stay tuned to find out. Today is going to be a care collab video with several other YouTubers. We're going to talk about how we care for the Sogo Vivien and any other quirks and tips that we might have. So please check out the other YouTubers, and I will have the links to their videos in the description below. So for my Sogo Vivien that I got a few years ago, sad to say, it did not make it over the winter season. I think it got a kind of rot, and so all the leaves started slowly falling off until it was only a bare stem with roots. And unfortunately, that plant just really did not survive. As sad as it is to lose a plant, this was an opportunity to get a replacement. So I got two Sogo Viviens from Orchids from Hauserman, and they are actually a lot smaller than I got previously. I'm not sure if they've just gotten better at growing these things or what, but these plants come in these tiny, almost like 1 inch, 2 inch pots, and they're already spiking. So they haven't opened their buds yet, but I know that they will come quite soon. I have my fingers crossed that these guys will make it and I will be able to take care of them in the long term. I think I did pretty well with my previous Sogo Vivien. I had it for a couple of years already, but I do need to watch out for my winter temperatures because I think it just got too cold, too wet, and it was just so stressed out that it got a rot. So I have to be better about that. So in my previous video, I shared my general care for this plant, and it's ultimately the same because here in Southern California, I really focus on growing my Phalaenopsis indoors. And so these plants will definitely stay indoors. The only thing that I'm really changing is that instead of growing it near a sunny window, I'm growing it under lights. I picked up the Barina lights about a couple of months ago, and I put these plants under it because I think it definitely needs more constant attention, and having more light will definitely help these plants grow more evenly, more consistently, and I think I'll just have less problems with them. When it comes to the winter season, I will definitely be putting these plants on some sort of heat mat or something just so that it can dry out and so that it stays nice and warm to just keep it growing throughout the season. I think if it just gets too cold in this place, it gets too wet, it just seems to stress it out and the plant just doesn't make it. It also depends on the temperature of your house, and in this particular space, I actually keep it fairly cool. So it gets down to 50s during the winter season, and that is quite cool for Phalaenopsis. I think they definitely like it a lot warmer than that. I think they tend to really thrive in that 70 to 80 degree range in temperatures, and when the temperature does drop during the winter season, I think they just do better in that 60 degree range, not really that 50 degree range. So that big 10-degree difference in temperature really makes a difference as it gets cooler, and if it's not dry and it's cool, then it's problems. These phals are in sphagnum moss. I haven't repotted them yet, but most of my phals tend to be in sphagnum moss already. I don't plan to change that out. I really do like having that moisture retaining media, so I'm going to keep it that way. If I use bark or leca or some other media for these plants, they just dry out way too fast for me, and I find myself watering it all the time that it becomes quite a chore. So the easier I can make the maintenance part of growing these plants, the better it is in the long term. Also, I may try to put these in a self-watering setup. In some cases, some of my phals are in self-watering and they seem to do okay, but I think I just have to work out that balance between the type of media I want to use and a self-watering setup to really maximize the growth of these plants. This is the year that I'm really trying to focus and hone in on improving my culture for these plants so that I don't lose them. I really don't want to lose phals. I don't want to lose any more plants, so I'm going to have to baby them a little bit more in order for them to do well. The Sogo Vivien is quite an interesting plant because it has this beautiful variegated leaves, and most phals don't come with this kind of variegation. I think the other plant that I've seen that has this similar variegation would be a Sideria japonica shima. This plant is cloned because if you were to take the seeds from this plant and flask them, they will all turn out with green leaves. So they won't have any variegation at all. I think that's just part of its recessive trait, and that's why it doesn't grow variegated plants, even though the plant itself is variegated. One of the papers that I read suggests that these plants are primarily propagated through stem cuttings. Stem propagation is basically where you take the flower spike and you remove the section above where the flowers had bloomed, and there are a couple of nodes that are not used yet. Basically, you cut them up and you use each node to propagate into a kind of multiplication media. Basically, you want this plant or this part of the stem to grow a new plant. This is the primary way that they've used to create these plants. The cloning process for this plant is fairly slow. So each flower spike may only have 2 or 3 nodes, so it can make maybe 2 or 3 plants. Some places have a way where you can use that one small plantlet and then you can divide it out to make more of them and propagate it in mass. But it seems to be not a high volume process. So that's probably why you don't see these plants as widely available, because it takes a little bit longer to create these plants and the yield is ultimately a lot lower than you would get from seed. Basically, that's a long-winded way of saying that these plants are kind of hard to grow and propagate, and that's why you just don't see it out for sale that often. It seems like every couple of years they'll be re-releasing these plants in, kind of sized up batches, and so you'll see them everywhere for a little bit and then they kind of disappear for a while. And I think that's the case now because this spring season I saw a lot of Sogo Viviens for sale from various vendors. So I think they just recently released like a huge batch of them, so everyone kind of has one. And this plant is also called the Doritaenopsis, and it's interesting because a lot of the Doritaenopsis species have been renamed and reclassified as Phalaenopsis. And diving into the history of that, I haven't been able to figure out where they got the Doritaenopsis parent from. So if anybody knows, please let me know. I just kind of nerd about it. I want to know more. I believe the Doritaenopsis influence is shown by one, having a more upright growth habit. So the leaves tend to grow more upwards rather than kind of tilting or spilling over. It also tends to grow the flower spike more upright. And it does have a cascade pattern, but overall it doesn't really, but I'm not sure because sometimes I have seen spikes that kind of just grow like straight to the side versus growing straight up. And also the other thing it imparts is a red lip on the flower. So I think those are kind of the characteristics of what the Doritaenopsis imparts onto this plant. But overall, I think it acts more like a Phalaenopsis than it does a specific Doritaenopsis species. Because this is a hybrid, it has a mix of different parents and different species in it, it's really hard to tease out what characteristics this plant is more like compared to the species parents. For me, it kind of has everything I want in a Phalaenopsis, except maybe if it had a fragrance, then it would be like the ultimate plant for me, because it has, variegated leaves, it has a very floriferous flower spike, and the flowers themselves are really beautiful. So it really does check all the boxes of what makes a beautiful phal for me. Another interesting thing is that the flowers themselves, they can grow in a normal pattern, and sometimes it can have mutated flowers or peloria. So that means that some of the petals of the plant may try to mimic the lip and look a little different. Depending on which clone that you have, sometimes the mutations will be a little unstable. So I've seen it where sometimes one petal will be peloric, but the other one won't, and it'll have a little asymmetry. And sometimes not every flower on the spike has the same kind of mutation. So some may be normal, some may be peloric, some may be a little wacky. So that kind of instability might not be ideal for, an award or a show. For personal satisfaction, it's just kind of interesting because plants do kind of weird things, and this one is one of the weird ones out there because of all the cloning and all of the kind of mixed genetics that are in it. It's expressed in different ways and different patterns. So when it comes to the Sogo Vivien care, I keep it pretty simple. I water it regularly with tap water, I keep it under lights, and I use a heat mat, or I will be using a heat mat in the winter season so that it can continue to grow and kind of take the edge off of the cooler temperatures. That's basically it. So hopefully these ones will do well, and I'll share with you the blooms once they open. They're still budding right now. They haven't opened quite yet. It'll probably be a few more days or weeks before it'll finally open. So that's it for the Sogo Vivien. I hope you will check out all the other YouTubers in this care collab and check out all their videos to see how they do with the Sogo Vivien. Hopefully they'll have some blooms to share as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!